Have you ever been so mad at an ex that you just wanted to drag them into a courtroom to prove a point? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're extracting the hidden life and legal maxims from the absolute chaos of small claims court transcripts. We're peering right behind the bench to see exactly what happens when bad decisions, broken hearts, and totally bizarre human behavior collide with the law. We're skipping all that dense legal jargon and getting right into the raw, unfiltered drama to find the highly practical lessons that you can actually use in the real world. To set the tone, we're starting off with this razor-sharp reality check delivered by a judge to a guy who was suing his much younger ex-fiancée. He proudly claimed to the court he was suing her purely on principle, for back rent and some ancient loans. But let's look at the facts here. You've got a 36-year-old married man lecturing an 18-year-old about principle. Yeah. The judge immediately saw right through this ridiculous smokescreen, pointing out the glaring hypocrisy of his situation. It perfectly illustrates our overarching theme today. The courtroom is a place for hard facts, not self-righteousness. So here's our survival guide for today's explainer. We're going to cover love, loans and liability, family ties, financial lies, the check cashing trap, blaming the wrong person, and finally, the high price of anger. Let's jump right in. Section 1. Love, Loans, and Liability. This is where romance meets small claims. Picture this. A 36-year-old convenience store boss moves his 18-year-old employee into his home. Now, he'd been separated from his wife for 10 years, but he was still legally married. So they lived together for 4 years. But when they finally break up, the honeymoon phase ends and the bitter accounting phase begins. He decides to drag her to court, suing her for back rent and a credit card loan. But here is where the court steps in with a heavy dose of reality. You can't just suddenly demand rent years after the fact, simply because you're angry about a breakup, especially when she'd been contributing the whole time by paying for groceries and completely fixing up his house. The law isn't a time machine you can use to undo your past financial arrangements. And when love fades, people fight over the absolute pettiest things. I mean, we're talking about adults keeping meticulous, obsessive track of basement tables and ancient radios just to spite their exes. Across several cases, we see angry litigants marching into court demanding financial compensation for things like a used bicycle, a basement kitchen table, an old 1940s radio that was left out on a porch, and honestly, my personal favorite, built-in mini blinds. Yes, literally mini blinds. The court's lesson here is painfully simple, and it's a reality check a lot of people desperately need. Get over it. The court is not your personal moving company. If you want your old kitchen table back, go pick it up. The law simply won't indulge your spite just because you want to force your ex to sit down and write a check for a used bicycle. Moving on to Section 2. Family ties, financial lies. This is what happens when blood relations go to court. Here, you've got a daughter dreaming of a free cruise from New York to Canada, and her mother demanding cold, hard cash. Here's exactly what went down. The mother generously paid for a family cruise. But then, out of nowhere, the cruise company actually went bankrupt. Eventually, they issued a refund check. But the check was mailed directly to the daughter. Instead of simply handing the money back to the woman who actually paid for the trip, the daughter flat out refused. Her big defense? She claimed her mother had said, "Don't worry, it's a gift." But when the judge really pressed her in the courtroom, the actual truth came out. The daughter admitted her mother never once said the words, "It's a gift," not a single time. She just creatively interpreted the phrase, "Don't worry," to mean, "I'm going to keep your money and use it to fund my own trip to Florida." Well, the judge doesn't tolerate adults relying on others to fix their financial messes. Courts expect adults to, act like adults. And this led to an ultimate judicial mic drop, leaving the daughter with this highly quotable reality check. Beauty fades, dumb is forever. Ouch. The court swiftly ordered the daughter to pay back the full $1,306. The judge bluntly reminded her that at 30 years old, she desperately needs to stop creating massive problems for her parents to solve. She deliberately chose to keep a refund that simply wasn't hers, setting a terrible example for her own kids in the process. It's a really stark reminder that your wishful thinking does not override basic financial reality. All right, Section 3, the check cashing trap. This is a crucial legal lesson on loan repayment. Let's look at the fascinating case of an accountant who was suing her handyman ex-boyfriend. Now, they lived together for 3 years. When he finally moved out, he left her a check for $2,200. On the memo line, he explicitly wrote the words, "Loan payoff paid in full." But she thought she was smarter than him. She figured she could easily outmaneuver him legally. So she grabbed a marker, physically crossed out the words "paid in full,"
and marched straight to the bank thinking she just found this brilliant legal loophole. She cashed the check and then turned right around and sued him for even more money. She was absolutely convinced that by scratching out those 3 little words, she'd protected her right to keep coming after him.
But if you take absolutely nothing else away from this explainer, remember this. It's a vital, incredibly practical legal rule called accord and satisfaction. The crucial point is this: once you cash that check, the debt is settled. It is entirely regardless of what you scratched out with a pen. The law does not care about your marker. If you don't accept the check as the final, total payment, your legal obligation is to return it, uncashed, and ask for a new check. By depositing that money into her bank account, she legally accepted his terms. Her case for more money was immediately dismissed. It's a hard lesson, but an essential one to remember before you ever endorse a disputed check.
Section 4, blaming the wrong person, all about misdirected anger and liability.
When things go wrong, human beings have this fascinating yet terrible tendency. We desperately try to sue whoever is closest, even if they're completely innocent. Take the case involving the trade-in value of a '92 Geo Storm, which was exactly $2,000. A young woman and her boyfriend needed a new car. The boyfriend's grandmother, acting as a true good Samaritan, put the car in her own name to help them out. But when the couple eventually split up, the boyfriend took the car. Now, logic would dictate that the young woman sue her ex-boyfriend, right? But instead of suing the ex who actually took the car, she sued the Good Samaritan grandmother for her $2,000 down payment. The judge quickly pointed out the absolute absurdity here. The grandmother was just left holding the loan and had absolutely zero legal obligation to refund a down payment for a car she didn't even possess.
But the absurdity of misdirected anger really peaks in this fast food drive-thru disaster. Let's walk through this sequence of events. At the start of the timeline, a teenage worker is sent home from his fast food job after threatening a coworker. Now, instead of letting him stay home and cool off, his mother makes a fatal error in judgment. She puts him right back in the car and drives her enraged son back to the restaurant to confront the manager. The son storms into the back, taunts the coworker, and a physical fight breaks out. The coworker shoves the son, sending him crashing into the restaurant's glass window. The window completely shatters, raining glass all over a completely innocent customer and her dog who were just sitting in the drive-thru. So who pays? Well, the injured customer sued the mother and won $3,000. Why? Because putting an angry teenager in a car and driving him back to the scene of a fight was the exact bad judgment that caused the entire disaster.
Finally, Section 5, the high price of anger, how rage leads directly to financial ruin.
When a teenage argument escalated in a front yard, logic completely left the building. 2 teenagers were yelling at each other. Instead of just acting like the adult and sending everyone home, the stepmother flew into a blind rage. She grabbed an armful of clothes and CDs from a car, marched over to a 55-gallon drum, and threw them all into a raging fire. So there they were in court, fighting over burnt CDs. And the judge had to sit there completely deadpan and assign a monetary value to the surviving empty cases. Master P, Destiny's Child, DMX, valued at $15 each. Because she couldn't control her temper for just 5 minutes, that little bonfire tantrum resulted in a hilariously itemized, court-ordered $210 judgment. But absolutely nothing tops this next sequence for the absolute worst chain of decision-making. A guy convinced his ex-girlfriend to buy over $3,000 worth of surveillance gear on her credit card. When he couldn't get it to work, he decided to return it. Step 1, buy expensive spy equipment. Step 2, tell your brother to pack it up and ship it back to the company for a refund. But his brother, who was completely clueless about the whole operation, mistakenly packed up a random, ordinary cell phone instead and mailed that back to the company. When the company received a cheap cell phone instead of their high-end surveillance gear, they naturally refused the refund. So the guy is sitting there holding the broken spy gear, realizing the refund has been denied because of his brother's incredibly stupid packing mistake. Instead of picking up the phone, calling his ex-girlfriend, and calmly trying to fix the shipping error, he snaps. Out of sheer, unadulterated frustration, he walks outside and literally throws the actual $3,000 piece of electronics straight into a lake. No way, right? In a matter of seconds, he transformed himself from a dissatisfied customer into a man who owes exactly $3,035. The court didn't hesitate for a second. Because he willfully destroyed the property in a fit of rage, he was ordered to pay his ex-girlfriend the full balance immediately. It really comes down to this. The court has a 100% success rate at awarding financial compensation and a 0% chance of fixing your bad judgment. The courtroom really is a fascinating mirror held up to society. It has the absolute power to force you to pay for the DMX CDs you burned in a 55-gallon drum, the drive-through window you caused to be shattered, and the expensive spy phone you dramatically threw into a lake. But judges are utterly powerless to correct human nature. They can't force you to be a reasonable, logical person before you act.
Ultimately, the legal system can make a victim financially whole. But it leaves us with a provocative thought to ponder. When you act out of pure spite, aren't you really just taxing yourself? Whether you're obsessively fighting over a basement table, illegally crossing out words on a settlement check, or driving a furious teenager back into a fistfight, bad judgment always comes with a hefty invoice. Keep your head cool, understand your actual legal obligations, and remember, the court deals strictly in facts, not your feelings. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.